Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. I'm gonna do a little streaming seminar on My Funny Valentine. I know maybe it's not the most popular song of all time, but it's one of my favorite ballads. Such a moody song, and it's almost Valentine's Day, so I thought the it fit the season and what have you. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I know we got people from all over the world. It's 11 p.m. here I'm in Kawasaki, Japan, actually, right on the border of Tokyo. And it's a little late for me, but I had my cup of coffee at 8 p.m., so ready to rock it here. So here's the idea. Here's my idea for today's seminar. I got a new little setup here. I got my overhead camera so you can see my hands playing. I also got this thing called Cordy, which my friend Elia hooked me up to, so you can see the notes I'm playing. And we got the sheet music over here, so you can follow along with the sheets. And I got the wide view here, and then I also got another scene here, so check this out. When I want to show something a little more specific, you want to see a chord or a scale, you can switch it here, and you can see the close-up view like that. So anyway, so what we're gonna do tonight, what my idea is that I would start off by talking about my arrangement. In fact, this really is more of an improvised arrangement. I had some ideas, just some loose concepts before I started to play it, but it was a song I've played a lot in the past, so I had some idea of what I was going to do harmonically and things, but I didn't have the notes written out, and a lot of it was basically improvised. So I'm going to talk just about kind of how I arrange, how I approach playing, some general concepts. I thought it'd be fun to pick one song and kind of have specifics for that song, but almost all the things that I talk about that are specific to this song could be applied to, in general, about musical arranging or improvisation. The concepts can be used on other songs. Some things very specifically could be used, and more general concepts as well. So I find it nice just to pick a song to focus on and then use that to branch off from into other things. So anyway, let's dive into it. That's the first thing. I want to talk just generally about what I played here, what I was thinking, the arrangement. And then I'm going to dive into some more nuts and bolts about why I use this scale, how to approach using scales, of different variations you can use on scales. Maybe we'll do, if there's a little time, I might show a little bit of some reharmonization examples for this song. I didn't do a lot of reharm. A lot of the harmony on this is relatively close to the original. Then I just was feeling sort of this moody vibe to it, like a dark ballad love song vibe for this one. So I didn't do as many reharms as I might normally do, but that's the thing with reharms is you can do lots of them, or you can do none, or you can do a sort of at the right times. I like to do sort of pick my places where I really think it needs some cool reharmonizations, but there's a lot of things you can do that aren't complete reharms, but maybe just like cool voicings or slight subtle changes and things. So anyway, let's get into this. So I'm gonna start off. Oh, and at the end, after I go through everything, I'm gonna try not to do too many questions in the middle. Otherwise, I think it'll just get a little bit kind of distracting, maybe. So I am going to try to focus and save the questions till the end, and then I'll have a lot of time at the end. I'll try to answer questions in detail, and you can shoot me things about this song or about other songs, or general concepts, how to practice, whatever. I'll be happy to answer as many as we can. I'm going to try to shoot for about 1 hour tonight. All right, so let's get into it. So first off, okay, let's start with the arrangement. So I start off with this intro, and most people like to do intros. It can be a little abrupt just to dive right into the melody. Although that's always an option as an arranger. It's like you could not do an intro, and that's a choice. Arranging is really just a set of choices. You're going to do an intro or you're not going to do an intro. That's a part of the arrangement. I think for a song like this, it's just really nice to create a world, a mood, an atmosphere, set up the vibe before we get into the melody. It's kind of like an opening to a movie. I really like movie music, and I often think like kind of maybe I arrange and compose like I'm writing a score for a movie or something, creating a scene, creating the intro, trying to get you in the mood for the melody. So that's basically what I was thinking here, and it's a really very simple intro that I do here in the beginning. I'm just using a C minor chord, and I'm even really just using the bare bones. I'm not even playing the third in my left hand, and just playing this moving voice that's going up to the minor 6, and then minor 7, and then to the 6. So ba ba ba, this little counter voice moving like this, which is the harmony that I use in the beginning of the melody. So this is something that you could use anytime you want to create some kind of moody intro, a dark minor type of thing. And you could do this on a major chord as well, something that kind of can move around like that fifth going up, or it can move back down as well. You can start on the root and come back down. This is a really, very famous progression that's used in all kinds of songs. But anyway, here, let me play you sort of the idea of what I had here for this intro. You can kind of follow along. And here we go. All right, so I think that kind of really gets the tone set, the mood set here to dive into the melody here. That's when we get to letter B. And at letter B, so the intro is starting really rubato. There's really not much tempo there. It's just kind of floaty, really spacey and sparse notes. Then we get to B, and it kind of is still a bit rubato, but kind of pick up the tempo here. The accompaniment has a syncopated little feel going to it now. So it's just kind of one step higher with the accompaniment here. I'm adding a little bit more harmony. We get the melody. And then one thing you notice here is I'm playing the melody in this range here. Bum, ba, 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 da, da, right? But when there's space in between the melody, I'm adding a counter line. But when I do the counter line, I don't play it in the same range as the main melody. If I did that, it's going to sound too close to the melody, right? So I play the counter melodies up an octave or 2 octaves way up here, almost like it's a different instrument, like I'm orchestrating something for a different instrument, and that way it won't get in the way of the real melody. You can clearly hear that this is the main melody, and then you could clearly hear that this is the counter melody. So as I'm doing it, go ahead and give that a listen about the range of it. So here's from letter B, which is actually the A section of My Funny Valentine. So, okay, there we go. Again, nothing hard. There's not even really anything complicated about it harmonically, but just the spacing of the melody, having the different ranges, kind of continuing this vibe that I started from the intro, and just kind of continuing that, kind of building on that. And then that's going to take us to the next section, the next 8 bars, where, again, we're just kind of continuing that vibe, but expanding it a little bit. Now I've moved the bass down. It's almost like another instrument has come in. There's a new range added. Up till now, I haven't played anything really below this middle C. Now all of a sudden there's a bass tone that comes in. So it's like more instruments have been added to the arrangement. So it's just building and trying to kind of build it up to the B section of the song, which is letter D, on the sheet music here, but where it goes to the major. Up till here, it's all minor, and then we're building to that. So it's really kind of building gradually the tension until we get to the major section of the song. So here, this is from letter C on my arrangement. I'll play from there. So yeah, we've kind of built up the tension, the volume, the dynamics have kind of worked its way up until this B section of the song. It's letter D on my arrangement, but it's actually it's the B section of the original song. And here it goes to major. It's C minor up till here, and now the relative major comes in, the E flat major. So it really changes everything, the color of the song. It kind of lightens up. The sun comes out. It's not so dark anymore. So I've kind of been building up to this section. And the original song is usually this harmonic progression that goes sort of more like kind of 1, 2, 3, just moving like this. And then... but I like to play, and I'm not the only one that does this. This is just a common thing to do, is to turn this into a pedal tone where everything in the bass... everything is a B flat in the bass, and then the chords are moving on top of that. So that's a nice thing to do, especially when you have this kind of section that's a bit ambiguous with the chords. It's not really have a strong harmonic direction. It's just kind of floating around in this E flat major vibe. So it's a nice thing to do. It builds up the tension. Whenever you bring in a pedal tone, it really kind of lifts the tension and kind of creates some excitement in the music. So here we go from letter D on my score here. And then we come back to the minor vibe that we started in the original part, but now it's really built up. The left hand is expanded. It's now doing full chords with the left hand, where it started as just like this little thing. So now it's really built up. So it's gradually building. And now there's a little more action going on with the right hand, and the counter melodies, they're getting a little more intricate. So here I'll play the last section of this song. Let's see. Here we go. From letter E. And then at the end, when we get resolves at the one chord at the end here, usually that's an E flat major, and then it goes to a 2-5-1. Well, I wanted to create something. It's almost like a Debussy prelude, if you will. This sort of harmonic kind of parallel harmony where everything is moving up. Everything here is based on the interval of a perfect fourth. and we're just moving around chromatically here, parallel, and then it kind of goes to a minor 7 flat 5 to the G7, and this is like a sort of a secondary theme. It's not the main theme, but it's a secondary theme that I put in here that I bring back at the end of the song. So it's sort of like a hint to what the ending is going to be like. That's things I like to do. I like to hint at maybe what I might do at the end, or if I'm improvising something and I come up with an idea like that on the end of the A section, like a little interlude idea or some kind of thing, then I'll try to remember that and bring that back later. It's just like secondary themes that can come back, or it could be something you did at the intro that comes back at the ending, or things like that. So it's really important part of performing, improvising, arranging is thinking sort of compositionally, that if you create some kind of theme or some kind of secondary theme, that maybe that secondary theme comes back, and it doesn't have to come back exactly the same, but come back in some form or another. So if you try to arrange too much where you have idea after idea after idea, what can happen is it can get really tiring for the listener if there's too many ideas going on. So it's really important to kind of choose things to come back to. And that makes it easier to arrange that way too, because you can come back and re-hit the thing that you liked in a little bit different way. So whether it's composing, arranging, or improvising, it's really like those three things: composing, improvising, arranging. They're essentially the same thing, but in a sort of slightly different format. They're all based on creativity. Arranging is taking a song and sort of turning it into your own style, your own version of that song. Composing is creating something from scratch but writing it out piece by piece, and improvising is really just composing there on the spot. So I don't know, those three things to me are essentially one and the same, so they can all be sort of interchanged. What you do with improvisation you could apply to composition, what you learn in composition you could apply to arranging, and vice versa. So you get the idea. It's all music basically, what I'm getting at. All right, so from there, that takes us to the improvised solo. And maybe compared to other jazz musicians, I guess I call myself a jazz musician, although I use that term somewhat loosely, and I don't like to, I don't really like to define myself or define music in such simple terms, categorize. I can only do jazz. I like to play all kinds of different styles of music. I have a big jazz background, so a lot of things I do tend to come out in a jazzy way. But I grew up listening to all kinds of music. I like all kinds of music, as do most people. So yeah. Anyway, my point. I'm not even sure. I've kind of lost train of thought there. I'm not even sure what my point is there. But, I do remember now my point about the solo. I don't tend to take as long a solo as maybe a typical jazz musician might take. I tend to keep my solos a little bit shorter, and I try to keep them in a very specific direction. Like there's a very specific purpose to what I want to do with my improvised solos. And typically in this particular case, I bring the music down. It kind of comes down here, and I want to build it back up to the B section. So this song, the format of the song is kind of long. One chorus, because it's very slow, the tempo, one chorus ends up being about 2.5 minutes. So if you just play two choruses, you're already looking at about 5 minutes, which is a pretty lengthy song. I throw in the intro and I throw in the ending, and now we're already at 6 minutes with just two choruses. So if I did a full chorus of a solo and then I come back and play half the melody or full melody, then we're talking 7-8 minutes. That's pretty long. Again, I'm not saying that you can't do that, and there's a great music that's that long, but I'm not sure that I can make you want to listen for that long. I don't know if I have that much confidence to play in 8 minutes of My Funny Valentine and keep you interested. So I decided, let's just do half the chorus of the solo and then come back in on the B section. That's a very common thing to do on a ballad, is to just improvise half the tune and then come back on the B section. So that's what I did here. And what I want to do is build the solo so that it really, comes back to the B section with a lot of impact. It's like really built into that, and it's really kind of just taking you in a journey from this kind of dark, minor-y place and building us to that bridge section. So that's a lot of what I like to do with my solos, is really take you from one place to another. There's a very specific purpose to my solos. So anyway, here, I'll try to play this, even though this is an improvised solo. I might kind of stray off a little bit from it, so forgive me if it's not exactly like the score, but I'll try to play something similar as close as I can to it. So here we go. Here's from letter F. So then here, I've got back to the B section of the song, which is here at letter G on my score. And it's similar progression that I used to on the first time I played the B section, but it's built up. It's definitely bigger than the first time I tried to bring it to a new level. It's the next climax of the piece, if you will. So, and I did throw in a little bit of a different chord than the first time. Here we go. Let's see where we at. It's letter G, right? Here we got a E major 7 over B flat. So that's a really, pretty dissonant sounding chord, but it's a nice little tension to create there that you can do over the B flat. So you can kind of do a lot of different types of things over a pedal tone. The first time I kept it pretty simple, and I could go way, way more than I did. This is just kind of a pretty mellow version of what I could do harmonically with this, but you could do all kinds of different things, E major over, you could do a G flat over B flat, you could F, you could really get tense on this. You could do any chord, really, pick any chord over that B flat. And for instance, if you have the melody here, the melody's a B flat. Well, any chord that has a B flat in it, like a B major 7 or a C7, a D flat 6, D, any of these types of chords, an E flat minor, an E with a flat 5, all these different sounds you could add to that. So it's something fun to experiment with, especially when you have that pedal tone. You can really get dissonant with the chords on top of the pedal tone, and it sounds really cool. So anyway, then we get to measure 63. And then I'm just kind of doing this building the tension with little kind of classical-y, Chopin-esque. Break the pedal tone to chromatically moving down. Little counter thing going. Now we're back to the final minor section, the final A section, if you will. Letter H on my score. And here, take us to the end of the piece. All right, I'll play from there to the end.
then, like I said before, at the end of the first A section, I had this little counter theme that I bring back here, but I kind of expand on it, turn it into a little section. So the first time was sort of a preview, and here's the full version of it. And just finish with a nice little E flat major, 13 sharp 11, this kind of sound. That's a nice, I'm sure some of you know, that's a nice chord to end on this Lydian sound. With the sharp 11, you can play like sort of an F major triad on top of an E flat major, and you get this very kind of spacey sound that sounds really nice to end a song with. So anyway, yeah, basically here, this is what's called parallel harmony, where you have a particular voicing, and it's moving in the exact same way, either up chromatically or whole steps or minor thirds. It can move in all kinds of different directions, but essentially the idea of parallel harmony is that everything is moving in the same interval. I changed a major 7, moving up half step, then moving down a minor third, back. And basically I'm just creating this little melody, but harmonizing it with parallel harmony. It's kind of similar to something that you might find in a Debussy prelude, or like Clair de Lune or something. He does similar type of things. Like Bill Evans does many similar type of stuff like this. I'm not the one that invented this by any stretch of the imagination, but I like to use these kind of harmonies. It sounds really cool, and especially if you can make it sound melodic like that, then it sounds really nice, and you can turn an ending into something special as opposed to just, finish the song. That's kind of a little hokey, but throw in a nice little section at the end, and now it's a special ending. It's like a unique ending here. And you could go in many different directions with that, but those are some concepts that I hope that you might be able to apply to other songs that you work on, or just arranging, composing, improvising in general. So now that I've kind of talked about the general concept of my arrangement, I'm just going to dive in a little bit here on specifics about what chords I use, what scales, how to decide what scale to use for this song, and then for other songs as well. So, I'm sure some of you maybe not so interested in this particular song, but there's some things that you could absolutely learn that you could apply to many other songs, just in music in general. So whenever you're working on jazz, and just thinking about jazz in general, I know I started as a classical pianist. I switched to jazz. I started playing jazz when I was in high school, in the jazz band. And most of the time when people think about learning classical music, it's like you're learning a piece, you're learning a song, and then you learn another song. And of course you learn things from that song, that maybe techniques, and you get some familiarity with keys and stuff. Yeah, but really you're just kind of learning song to song. And maybe subconsciously you're learning things musically, but a lot of times you don't really analyze the music, and you don't look at the patterns. Classical pianists tend to just focus on the technique of playing the song. With jazz, you really have to approach it in a much different way. You have to think of it like learning a language, and every song that you learn has so much valuable information in it that you could learn a huge amount of the information or the language of jazz from just this song. Like, I'm not saying you can learn the whole thing, but you could learn a lot, and that you could apply it to so many other songs. So if you approach it like that, when you learn a song, it's like you're learning vocabulary to a new language that you can apply to all kinds of different songs. And really, really recommend that you approach learning jazz like that. What patterns can you learn from this song? What cool harmonic progressions can you learn? Or what kind of scale did you learn for this one that you can apply on another song? So definitely think about learning jazz in that mindset, as opposed to just learning a song and moving on to the next song. Like, I'm not saying that that's the right way to learn classical. It would probably be much more beneficial to really dissect the song and like analyze the progressions and things like that. When I started to get into jazz, that's what I actually started to do with classical music that I had studied. Is I started to go back to it and analyze it, and like Chopin, and analyze the harmony or Debussy and take things from that. I learned a lot of my vocabulary from Debussy by taking some of the things that he did and learning it in different keys and analyzing it and figuring out how I could use that in jazz music. So anyway, it's just a different mindset that I recommend you think like that. So anyway, let's dive in here to the chord chart. So I'm going to switch the scene over here so we can get a little more detailed here. All right, so I'm going to break out here the melody. Here we go. The lead sheet. Now this is more or less the original changes to the song. It's not the changes that I played, but the original changes, you have the C minor, the 1 chord, and then you have this chromatic bass line that moves down for the first 4 bars, and that happens 3 different times in the song. There's 3 sections where it moves like that, and that's a progression that you'll see in a lot of different, not even just jazz, and all kinds of music. This minor, major 7, or it can move like this where the bass is moving down like this, but it can also move where the bass stays on C, but the moving voice is on top and comes down like this as well. That's another way that you can do it. So one way to do it. Or you could keep the bass as C and to have that inner voice moving here. So that's the original changes, and what I'm playing is actually something that I heard Keith Jarrett play this, but I like it that it's sort of the same as James Bond, right? Where it's the 5th moving up, and that's another kind of a cool way to play minor chords where the 5th moves up instead of the root moving down. So that way you get C minor with this flat 6 here, and then you could go to 6, but I go to 7 here, and then I go to the 6 here. So you got, then we go to the A flat, 2 5 1 2 C minor. So let's talk about what kind of scales you could use over these chords. Now, in general, I'm going to talk about minor scales in general here, and then we'll apply it specifically to these chords. But so one thing to think about minor scales is that there's usually, okay, when I'm talking about most standard jazz music, I want to break it down, simplify it to the easiest way to understand how to approach minor scales. Now, there's 4 modes that are usually used for minor scales: and Aeolian, Dorian, harmonic minor, melodic minor. Those 4 modes have 5 notes that are the same, common tones: the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5. Between any of those 4 different modes, none of those notes will change. So most of the time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is not going to change when you have a minor 7 or a minor 6 or some kind of minor chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is almost always in standard jazz going to be these 5 notes. So if you know that ahead of time, then you know that you're only really dealing with the 6th and the 7th. So that kind of, I think knowing that makes it a little bit easier to digest the different variations that you could use, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first one we're going to talk about here is the Aeolian scale. Aeolian scale is the same as a natural minor scale. If you're not familiar with the modes, you've maybe heard natural minor scale, which is essentially an E flat major, but starting with C minor, or C Aeolian. And when you're learning a mode or you're learning a scale, especially if it's a new scale, it's something that you're not familiar with, you want to play around with it. You want to improvise with it, kind of, play it up and down like you would a typical classical practice, but you want to improvise with it, play around with it, and also get into the sound of it. What kind of feeling does that scale have? Like what is it about that scale? What sound does it have? Now, to me, an Aeolian is kind of a traditional minor sound, something you might hear a lot in classical music. It's a very kind of plain minor sound. There's nothing really unique, fancy about it. Doesn't mean that it's not good, and it can be used in incredible ways, depending on how you use it. But to me, it's just a kind of a regular classical minor scale, right? If you will. Then we get to the Dorian scale. Now, the Dorian scale, if we relate it to the Aeolian scale, there's only one difference, and that's the sixth now has become natural. The natural sixth. So when you think of Dorian, that's what you really want to, the thing that should pop in your head is that natural sixth sound. That's what gives Dorian really is kind of a cool, unique character that to me sounds like cool jazz. There's a style of jazz from the 50s and 60s called cool jazz. Miles Davis his music used a lot of this Dorian sound, like So What and Milestones, and a lot of his music used these Dorian type sounds. So to me, this is kind of that cool jazz sound, just by changing that flat six to a natural six. Much different character than an Aeolian sound. Then we get to the harmonic minor. The harmonic minor is like a natural minor, but instead we have the natural seventh here. And then this scale, you're probably more familiar with this if you've studied classical piano. And to me, it just sounds like a Halloween, minor, very minor-y sounding scale. It's a pretty easy one to sort of imagine. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about, there's more, but these are the four main ones that I think you should know to be able to play on jazz standards. Melodic minor has the natural sixth and the natural seventh, so it's essentially like a major scale but with a flat third. You can think of it like that, or a minor scale with the natural sixth and seventh. It's got this cool tension. To me, it's more of a modern jazz sound, kind of similar to Dorian, but even more tension than Dorian. So definitely you should really know these four scales when you're playing on a song. And then how do you decide which one to use? Well, a lot of times you could use any of these, especially on this particular song. But if you're gonna play, let's say for instance, the first one is C minor, so maybe Aeolian would be the natural, sort of the obvious choice here. And then we get a C minor over B. Now because that B is in there, the Aeolian won't work because it's gonna get in the way of the natural seven and the flat seven are gonna collide with each other. So essentially what you don't want to do with scales is have three chromatics in a row when you're trying to decide what scale to use. There shouldn't be, so if I shouldn't have three chromatics in a row when I'm deciding what mode to use. Now that doesn't mean that you can't play three chromatics in a row when you're improvising. You absolutely can, and sometimes you absolutely should sometimes. But what I'm talking about is deciding what mode sort of to focus on. You shouldn't have three chromatics in a row. So if we're gonna have, so for that matter, you could either do harmonic minor, or you could do melodic minor. Either one of those have the natural seven and would work fine. So that's really, either one of those sounds would work just as well. And then you have a C minor 7, which you could again go back to Aeolian, or you could also go to Dorian. And then we get to the C minor 6, or the C minor over A. So then here we would again use Dorian, or you could also use melodic minor. Either one of those would work, but you wouldn't want to use, obviously, you wouldn't want to use Aeolian, because that's going to create 3 chromatics, or you also wouldn't want to use harmonic minor as well. It's going to create 3 chromatics. So that's sort of a quick general synopsis of how to approach minor chords, those 4 different chords, 4 different scales, 4 different modes. So then we get to the A flat major 7 here, which is, if we analyze the whole song, which is something you should absolutely do in the beginning, is decide what key this song is in. Well, this song's in the key of C minor, 3 flats. And then when you're analyzing the chords, relate and analyze them based on what number they are in that key. So the A flat's going to be the flat 6 of C minor. So naturally, the scale, the mode would be A flat Lydian. So that scale is going to sound really nice. You wouldn't want to play, for instance, it's an A flat major 7. You wouldn't want to play a regular A flat major 7 here, an Ionian. Not saying you couldn't, but it's going to stand out in a bad way to hear that D flat in relationship to the key because of where we are in the song. So if I played an Ionian, just to give you a bad example, that D flat really sticks out sort of in a kind of an awkward way. It's sort of an awkward note. That's why the Lydian sounds so much better here. Then we go to F minor 11. The obvious choice here would be Dorian. Or you could, this is an alternative, is go to a melodic minor sound. Either one of those would work. And then we get to 2-5-1, a minor 2-5-1, which, if you've studied jazz for even just a little bit, you've probably heard the 2-5-1. It's the most important utilized progression, a major 2-5-1 and minor 2-5-1. So it's something that you should definitely be able to play in many different ways. So let's take a look here at minor 7 flat 5, the 2 chord. When you see a minor 7 flat 5, so the chord minor 7 flat 5, or also it could be called a half diminished chord. The obvious choice usually is what's called Locrian. Locrian is the 7th degree of a major scale, so that would be E flat major scale, the 7th degree being D. That's the D Locrian scale, which is the obvious choice. The other alternative that you could do is a Locrian, actually this would be a Locrian natural 2. So the only thing that you're deciding when you get a minor 7 flat 5, you break it down, is you're going to use the flat here or the natural 2. The other notes, the 1, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7 don't usually change. So minor 7 flat 5 chords are usually pretty easy to decide on the scale. You're really just deciding on that note, that's the 2. And then we get to dominant chords. Now dominant chords have the most variation. They have all kinds of different scales that you can use on dominant 7 chords, because dominant 7 chords are the chords that usually create the most tension. So music is all about creating tension, releasing tension, creating tension, releasing tension. Well, the chord that creates the most tension is a dominant chord. So there's lots of different ways to create tension and lots of different scale patterns that we can use. So for one thing that when we're looking at, let me jump back here to the 2-5-1, the progression here. We have a 2-5-1, but this is a minor 2-5-1. So it's important to know if your 5 chord is resolving major or your 5 chord is resolving minor. That will make a big difference on what notes and what scale that you'd want to play. So for instance here, this is a minor, it's resolving to a minor chord, 5-1 minor, not 5 major, but 5-1 minor. So in that case, the obvious choice would be this scale, which is called the Phrygian dominant. Essentially, it's a C harmonic minor scale. that starts from G, Phrygian dominant scale. And this is a scale I like to use a lot on when I'm playing a minor. In a minor key, a 5 chord in a minor key, or resolving to a minor chord. Now you can also use what's called an altered scale. Let me move that down so you can see a little better. There we go, altered scale. This scale, or you could do a half whole diminish. Now, how do you know which one to use? There's others that you could use. I gave you 3 that I thought were maybe the best choices here, but you could use other different scales as well. But you wouldn't want to use a mixolydian on a 5 chord that's resolving to a minor. The mixolydian is going to sound like you're going to go to a major chord. Sounds a little bit strange to go mixolydian and then minor. So this sounds a little bit more natural to do the Phrygian dominant or even altered. Or the half whole diminished. Things like that. So here's a half whole diminish. So anyway, let's move on to the next part. So we have that first A section, and then we go to the next part, and essentially it's the same progression until we get to here, the A flat minor 6. This chord. Whenever we see an A flat minor 6, or not just an A flat minor, but any kind of minor 6 chord, that's usually implying that it's a melodic minor scale. It could be a Dorian, but typically it's a melodic minor sound. And that's what I believe here would make the most sense, harmonically speaking, what scale to use. And then it goes to a B flat 7, but this time, different from the G7, this one is resolving major. So you want to approach that completely with a different mindset. This is a dominant that's going major. So there, mixolydian would be the obvious choice that's going to sound the most natural, if you will. Doesn't mean it's the correct choice, it's just the one that fits naturally. Or you can do what's called a Lydian flat 7, where essentially you raise the 4th on the mixolydian, scale that I like to use a lot, and jazz musicians love to use all the time. And you could also do the altered scale, or the half whole diminished scale, or even the whole tone scale. I didn't put that in there, but you could, of course, do that. So those are some, again, on the dominant 7 chords are the most complicated. They have the most options to use. So it's going to take some time if you haven't worked with these scales a lot. You pick, what I would like to do is, if I'm going to practice this song, is to work on that. If you haven't spent a lot of time working on 2-5-1s, is to just take this one little progression here, this 2-5-1. Decide which scales you're going to use first. Okay, I'm going to stick with the Locrian for the 2, and then I'm going to do the Phrygian dominant for the 5. Kind of out of time, just kind of play around with the scales. And then the 1 I'm going to stick to, okay, let's say Aeolian for now. And just kind of go back and forth with that, just kind of rubato, just kind of playing around with it. Getting used to the scales, the sounds. And then try to do it in time. After you can kind of just play around rubatoli, get used to the notes a little bit, play up and down the scales, and then try to create melodies with it. Make a little vamp out of it, if you will. So 4 beats of D, 4 beats of G, and then maybe 2 measures of C minor. It might sound something like this. And then repeat. Then maybe you can try it again with a different scale and just kind of making these vamps out of things. Really, you have to have, if you want to learn how to improvise or you want to get better at improvising, the only way to do it is to actually do it. And to focus on progressions like 4-bar progressions, 2-bar progressions, whatever, 8-bar progressions, and make loops out of them, and really kind of focus on one small area at a time is really, I think, more productive than trying to do the whole thing at one time. There's too much information to digest. So break it down into small pieces, 4 measures, 2 measures, even just 1 chord at a time. If you're working on a new scale that you've never played before, well, just focus on that and spend 30 minutes just playing around with one scale, and so on and so on. So, and then one other thing I'd like to discuss, and then I'll jump into some question answers here, is, so I'm showing you here, I think it's important to know sort of what mode to use, or what mode that you're basing your harmony on when you have a chord, and what mode to play. But once you kind of get that mode, you know what mode to play, then it's important to add notes into the mode that aren't in the scale. So for instance, if we're playing, let's say the Aeolian, the C minor Aeolian scale. Well, most jazz musicians, even though they might be approaching it with that Aeolian sound, they're going to add other tones to that scale. For instance, the easiest tone to add on a minor scale would be a flat 5. That's going to give it a bluesy sound. So we can just add that to it, not change or replace it, but just add it. So it now becomes this 8-note scale. And then we can improvise with that. We can add that to any of those 4 minor modes that we talked about. The flat 5 is just a cool tone to add on any of the minor scales. You can also add the natural 7 if you're playing on a Dorian or an Aeolian, or both of them for that matter. Like So picking those tones, remember the flat 5 and the natural 7 on a minor chord, use those tones, add those tones to your improvising, and try to figure out how to make it. That's going to make it sound definitely more bluesy, more jazzy, a little bit more interesting than just playing the notes in the scale. And now you can use other notes. Those aren't the only tones that you can use. Those are the easiest tones to use, I would say. But you could also use any of the other tones, like the flat 2. You could add that. Like, you're moving chromatically, or you could even throw in a long sort of chromatic passages where you maybe do 5 or 6 chromatics in a row in the midst of a scale. So you're playing a scale, and then it kind of breaks into chromatic, and then it goes back to the scale, something like this. So you can combine chromatic scales with any of these chords that you learn. So getting used to that, of course, that takes some time and takes some practice, and to figure out how you like to do it. There's a way. I have my ways of using chromatic scales, chromatics, but you have to experiment and figure out how that makes sense for you and how it works. But really experimenting, lots of trying, trial and error, playing, having fun with it too, and like not really getting frustrated about I don't sound like McCoy Tyner, or I don't sound like Herbie Hancock yet. Okay, well, it's going to take a little time to get it. I mean, it's going to take some time before it's going to sound really good, but maybe you'll find a cool phrase, 1 out of 30, 1 out of 40 in the beginning. Oh wow, that was a really cool phrase. Like, that was a nice one. But you just got to keep kind of muddling through it, and just keep going through it, and then kind of making, okay, well, that note didn't sound so good, and that's okay. All you have to do is really make observations as you're playing. Like, that didn't work so well. And that's okay. Then you'll remember next time, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't play that note there. Those little things, it's just little pieces, little things, but that only comes from doing it. It only comes from improvising. There's not, I can kind of guide you and show you some tips, like I said about using the flat 5 on the minor. It's a little tip that you can play with around, but you got to go on your own and experiment and figure that out for yourself. So anyway, I hope there was a little bit of information in there that you found useful. Maybe it was too easy. Maybe it was too hard. I know there's probably a lot of different people with a lot of different levels that tuned in, but I appreciate you all checking it out. I'm going to take a little time here, answer some questions. If you have any questions, it can be about this song or it can be about jazz in general or really arranging, whatever. Any question you want to ask me, I'll take a few minutes here at the end. I hope I didn't bore you to death. So anyway, I know there's a little bit of delay with the YouTube, so I'll give you guys a second. Like, shoot me some questions. In the meantime, I'll just kind of fiddle around here. So, what's up? Let's see. Thank you, Jim Moore. I really appreciate your insight into making a piece more interesting, like your ending example a second ago. Thank you very much for that, Internet Privacy Advocate. Jacob, in more recent years, has developed an extreme sense of musical taste. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And Stephanie, what's up, Stephanie? Jacob, may I ask, will this video stay on YouTube so we can reference back to it as we learn the arrangement? I'm going to definitely keep it up for a while. I don't know for sure I'm going to keep it up forever, but I'll at least keep it up for a couple weeks, if not more. So, yes, it will stay up for at least a while. Uchida-san, thank you for this tutorial. I was losing motivation to play the piano these days and just listening to now I am motivated. Oh, great. Well, if I motivated somebody to play more, then I feel like that's a success. Then I'm glad. If I can help somebody motivate somebody, that would be great. I'm curious as to what piano you're using and how you sync to the on-screen keyboard, not the camera picture of your hands. All right, so nice question there. So I'm using an application. It's called Chordy. So I'll write it here in the chat so you can see it and definitely check it out. They're not paying me to do this, by the way. Chordy, cool little app that you can get. I think it's about $25. And it's got a lot of cool functions. I'm just using a actually really basic function of it. But it has like, you can play stuff and it'll tell you what chord it is. And it's got a lot of cool stuff. Actually, I just use it pretty much for this, but it's a cool little app. So definitely check it out. Eli, which classical composers most influence your jazz arrangements? Well, I would say for sure that would be Debussy and Chopin. Chopin, I studied a lot of the nocturnes. In fact, I've played all the nocturnes. I love his harmony and his sense of melody and the sort of the counter voices. Even this arrangement, I feel, is almost like of My Funny Valentine. It almost could be a Chopin nocturne in a sense. Like, I mean, the stylistically, it has some similarities, I believe, to it. So I love Chopin nocturnes. So. And then Debussy's harmony, especially like we talked about, that parallel harmony, that kind of chordal fourth type harmony is so beautiful. And so, yeah, I love that stuff. So I would say those two. Mari Coco. Good evening, Jacob-san. Could you play a bit of Little Brown Jug? This is the first TIFF that I played at my junior high school. I haven't played Little Brown Jug in decades. Like, really, since 20 some odd years. I would need this piece of sheet music. I don't even think I know how it goes right off the top of my head. I'm sorry about that. Maybe the next time if I have a chance to look at it. It's been so long. I know that's a famous song, but I haven't played it so long. I don't even remember how it goes. Red Jordan. When my piano teacher told me to create the improvisation for C Jam Blues, it took me 6 hours or more for the 12 bar. I wanted to make one similar to Red Garland's. If you were, how would you make it? If you were to make, a C Jam Blues improvisation similar to Red Garland's, how would you make it? That's an interesting question. Well, Red Garland, I have listened to some of Red Garland, and what I like about him is his sort of his really light touch, just kind of this bouncy, cool little. So it's kind of this really kind of light touch where the accents are kind of pronounced in staccato, but it's not a heavy, it's a really light kind of playing. So I think it's more, the notes, of course, are important, but the attack, if you really want to sound like Red Garland, then I think it's really about the attack. And so if I'm going to play C Jam Blues, this kind of just bouncing along vibe that I would try to go for, if that's what if you want to try to do that bouncy and kind of bebop-y type lines. Yeah, I mean, Red Garland's great. It's a great person to study. I think he's not so crazy choppy like Oscar Peterson. Oscar Peterson is great too, but he's, there's tons of chops, so it's a little bit hard to study unless you're got great ears. So Red Garland's a little easier to get into, I think, for people studying jazz. Amazing tips and suggestions. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Anna. Jim, there's so much to digest. Hard to think of questions right now, but you did an excellent job of discussing uses of different modes. As a relative beginner to jazz, modes are a bit of a challenge. Your explanation really helps understand where to use which. Now all I need is tons of practice. Yes, that's that's what we all need. We just need tons of practice. So yeah, I hope I inspired you to practice. That was kind of the goal here. Get everybody inspired to play and practice. And all right, this is the last one. I'm gonna call it a night. I'm actually, you might be able to tell, I'm trying not to sound like it, but my voice is kind of shot here. I've been teaching all day. I had some lessons this afternoon. I did the same seminar in Japanese for my Japanese channel, and kind of hitting the wall here. So this will be the last one. But I appreciate you guys coming out. This is fun. I want to do it again. I got this set up here now. I spent a long time getting lights. And I got this cool mic. I got the cam here, the software all set up. I got the mixer here, my keyboard, and my overhead cam, and the Cordy app. I spent a while to kind of get it sounding good. I hope it sounded all right for you guys. But now that I got it all set up, it's taking me like a long time to get this set up the way I wanted to. Now I got it set up. I can do this a lot easier now. So I'm going to do it again. It would be wonderful to have online jazz classes again this year. Do you think it may be possible? Yes, Stephanie. Yes, I this part of getting this all set up like this is so that I can do more things like this, and also like we did last year. I'm actually working on a website where I'm going to have some not live streaming. I'm going to do live streaming stuff like this as well, but where you can have some little video courses, things like that. So I want to definitely really dive into that more this year. I'm sorry it's taking so long to do it. Last year was just, obviously for a lot of people it was a strange year, to say the least. Not that it's that much different this year, but anyway. All right, thank you guys so much. All right, I'm gonna call it a night. I appreciate you all, and we'll talk soon. So I'll see you all next time. All right, thank you so much.